They came without warning on a Tuesday afternoon, not with a dramatic invasion fleet blotting out the sun, not with a mysterious signal intercepted by SET. No, the Vaxian Dominion arrived with surgical precision, their stealth technology rendering their ships invisible until the moment they struck. Captain Jack Morris was 30,000 feet above Nebraska when the sky turned purple. "Control, this is American Flight 1127. We're experiencing. I don't even know how to describe this." Jack's voice remained steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. 20 years as a commercial pilot had taught him to keep calm in emergencies, but nothing had prepared him for this. "All instruments are going haywire. The sky is changing color." He checked his co-pilot's expression to confirm he wasn't hallucinating. Sarah's wide eyes told him she saw it too. "Flight 1127, we're receiving similar reports across all airspace. Stand by," came the tense reply from air traffic control. That's when the turbulence hit, not the regular bumpy kind that makes passengers clutch their armrests. This was violent, as if the laws of physics themselves were being rewritten around the aircraft. "Mayday! Mayday! We're losing control!" Jack fought the yoke as the Boeing 787 plummeted through the atmosphere. Emergency oxygen masks dropped, passengers screamed, and Jack's world narrowed to a single goal: keeping 233 souls alive. A massive silhouette emerged through the purple haze, a structure so large it defied comprehension, angular, obsidian, impossible. The plane was being pulled toward it. "Sarah!" Full reverse thrust. "Fight it!" Jack shouted. They never stood a chance. In Washington, D.C., National Security Advisor Tom Williams burst into the Oval Office without knocking. "Mr. President, we have a global situation." President Richard Hayes looked up from his briefing documents. "You don't barge in here unless the world's ending, Tom?" "Sir, that might not be far off." Unknown craft have appeared in our airspace, simultaneously in every major nation. They're massive, beyond anything we've ever built or conceived. The president's face hardened. "Our response? Military is at DEFCON 2. But sir, our weapons aren't doing anything. Fighters are being absorbed, for lack of a better word. Nuclear deterrent is ready, but generals are hesitant. These things are hovering over population centers." The secure phone on the president's desk rang. "This is Hayes." His expression darkened further. "Understood. Keep me updated." He hung up. "The Chinese premier?" Tom asked. "No, that was NASA. Whatever these things are, they're not just in our atmosphere. There's something even bigger in orbit, and it's deploying smaller craft across the globe." The president stood, straightening his tie, a meaningless habit in the face of the incomprehensible. "Get me the Joint Chiefs, the UN Secretary General, and anyone who might have a clue what the hell we're dealing with." Dr. Ethan Mitchell was halfway through his physics lecture at Stanford when every electronic device in the room went dead simultaneously. The lights, the projector, even students' watches, all dark. "Everyone stay calm," he said, moving to the window. "Probably just a power." The words died in his throat. Outside, a massive shadow was passing over the campus, not a cloud, not any natural phenomenon. It moved with purpose, mechanical and precise. "Professor?" the student asked, the young woman's voice trembling. "Get away from the windows," Ethan ordered, his mind racing through scientific explanations and finding none. Everyone moved to the interior hallway. Now, as students rushed from the room, Ethan found himself frozen, watching in horrified fascination. The craft, because what else could it be, was slowing over the center of campus. His phone vibrated in his pocket, somehow working when nothing else was. One text message. "Sentinel protocol activated." "Come now." The number was blocked, but Ethan knew exactly who it was from. The project he'd abandoned 5 years ago, the theoretical defense system he'd helped design, then walked away from when he realized its implications. "They were right," he whispered to the empty room. "We were never alone." In rural Montana, Frank Daniels watched the news with growing unease, his wife Margaret pacing behind their worn leather couch. "They're saying it's happening everywhere, Frank. Everywhere." Frank's weathered hand clutched his coffee mug tighter. A Vietnam veteran turned cattle rancher, he'd seen enough of the world to develop a healthy skepticism of authority. "Government's probably testing some new aircraft," he muttered, not believing it himself. "Aircraft don't hover over every major city on Earth simultaneously," Margaret countered, stopping to stare at the chaotic news footage. Their daughter Emily burst through the front door, breathless, her ranch hand duties forgotten. "Dad! Mom! There's something in the sky over Billings!" Frank stood, moving to their rifle cabinet more out of instinct than any rational thought that a hunting rifle would help. "I'm calling Jason," Margaret said, reaching for the phone to check on their son stationed at an Air Force base in Nevada. The line was dead. The television broadcast stuttered, then cut to emergency broadcast graphics. The somber announcer spoke with barely contained panic. "We're receiving reports that unknown craft have begun deploying smaller objects over urban centers. Citizens are advised to remain indoors and away from windows." Frank's hand fell away from the gun cabinet. "Get to the cellar," he said quietly. "Now." The Vraxian Supreme Commander Zorthal studied the holographic display of Earth with 6 eyes that evolved to see spectrums humans couldn't comprehend. His exoskeleton clicked as he shifted his weight, addressing the gathered war council. "Primitive, exactly as our scouts reported. Their most advanced weapons can't penetrate our basic shielding." His second-in-command, Vexmore, manipulated the display to zoom in on military responses around the planet. "They're predictably aggressive. Every nation with flight capability has deployed their aerial weapons. And these nuclear devices they're preparing?" Zorthal inquired. "Fission-based. Rudimentary. Our graviton fields will neutralize them before detonation." Zorthal made a rasping sound that passed for satisfaction among his kind. "Their biological composition is ideal. The harvest will be efficient." "Supreme Commander," interrupted a lesser officer, "preliminary scans indicate their neural complexity is higher than predicted. Their cultures show unexpected diversity and resilience patterns." "Irrelevant," Zorthal dismissed. "They've barely left their own planetary system. 100 cycles of evolution would not prepare them for the Dominion. Begin the first phase." On the display, thousands of smaller craft detached from the motherships, descending toward Earth's surface. "And what of the anomalous readings? The energy signatures that don't match their known technology?" Zorthal's mandibles clicked with annoyance. "A statistical error. Nothing on this planet can harm us." Back on American Flight 1127, Captain Jack Morris regained consciousness amid twisted metal and screams. The plane had crashed, been placed inside something vast and alien. Other aircraft were visible in the cavernous space, commercial flights, military jets, helicopters. All damaged, all contained within this impossible hangar. And moving among the wreckage were tall, insectoid figures, methodically extracting survivors. Jack unstrapped himself, ignoring the pain shooting through his left arm. Sarah, wake up!" His co-pilot stirred beside him, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "What? Where are we?" "I don't know, but we need to help the passengers." As they struggled free of the cockpit, an inhuman screech echoed through the chamber. Jack peered through a shattered window to see one of the creatures lifting a terrified flight attendant with spindly limbs. Something snapped inside Jack Morris at that moment. Fear transformed into cold, calculated rage. He'd spent his life responsible for the safety of others, and alien or not, nothing was going to hurt his crew or passengers while he still breathed. He grabbed the emergency axe from its cabinet. "Sarah, get as many people as you can to the emergency exits. Stay low and quiet." "What are you going to do?" she whispered. Jack tested the weight of the axe in his hands and set his jaw. "I'm going to find out if these things can bleed." Across America, across the world, the invasion accelerated. Smaller craft descended from the motherships, deploying capture devices and paralytic fields. Military resistance proved futile, as conventional weapons couldn't penetrate alien shielding, communications networks collapsed, power grids failed. In the Oval Office, President Hayes received the worst possible news. "Mr. President," the Secretary of Defense reported grimly, "they're taking people, millions, some kind of abduction on a mass scale." "For what purpose?" the President demanded. "Unknown, sir, but based on the pattern, they're prioritizing population centers. We estimate they've already taken nearly 200 million humans worldwide." The room fell silent, the scale of the catastrophe beyond comprehension. "Options?" Hayes finally asked. "We still have nuclear submarines undetected in deep waters, ICBMs in hardened silos that could launch, but the targets are directly over our cities, sir." The impossible choice hung in the air. Sacrifice millions to potentially save billions. The President closed his eyes briefly. Begin evacuation of all major cities not yet affected. Authorize Special Access Program Omega. His chief of staff paled. Sir, Omega is theoretical. We don't know if it's all we've got. Hayes cut him off. Get me secure communications with Moscow, Beijing, London, and Delhi. If humanity goes down, we go down fighting together. At Stanford, Dr. Ethan Mitchell raced across campus against the flow of panicking students and faculty. The text message had activated dormant protocols in his mind, security clearances and coordinates embedded years ago. The cognitive sciences building basement had a reinforced door where a supply closet should be. Ethan pressed his palm against it, praying the biometric system still worked. They did. The door slid open to reveal a small elevator. Dr. Mitchell, greeted a voice he hadn't heard in years. Dr. Eleanor West, his former mentor and the driving force behind Project Sentinel, stood in the elevator. You're late. Little busy with an alien invasion, he replied, stepping inside. Not aliens, Eleanor corrected, as the elevator began a rapid descent. Harvesters. We've known about them for decades. Ethan's shock must have shown on his face. The Roswell incident wasn't their first visit, she continued, just their first mistake. We recovered technology, learned enough to know they'd return. Why do you think we pushed so hard on computing, material science, quantum physics? The elevator stopped, revealing a vast underground complex humming with activity despite the power outages above. Project Sentinel was never theoretical, Ethan. We just needed the right minds to solve problems without knowing the whole truth. Your work on quantum entanglement communication was the missing piece. You lied to me, Ethan said, anger rising. To all of us. We did, Eleanor admitted without remorse. And now humanity's survival depends on whether what we built actually works. She led him into a chamber where dozens of scientists worked frantically around a central device, a metallic sphere hovering above a platform pulsing with blue energy. Welcome to humanity's last hope, Dr. Mitchell. In Montana, Frank Daniels herded his family into their storm cellar as the skies darkened. His military instinct screamed that this was worse than any natural disaster. Dad, look. Emily pointed to the small transistor radio they kept for emergencies. It was crackling to life when all other electronics had failed. This is an emergency broadcast for all surviving military personnel and civilian militia, came a voice through the static. Code Broken Arrow. I repeat, Broken Arrow, this is not a drill. Conventional weapons are ineffective. Fall back to designated rally points. If communications remain compromised, proceed to nearest hardened government facility. Authorization Charlie Tango November 9. Frank recognized a military authentication code when he heard one, and Broken Arrow meant loss of nuclear weapons. The situation was beyond critical. Frank? Margaret clutched his arm, her voice steady despite her fear. What do we do? Frank thought of their son Jason, somewhere out there in this nightmare. He thought of Emily, barely 21. He looked at the hunting rifles that would be useless against whatever was happening above. We fight, he said simply, however we can. The cellar door suddenly rattled with impact from above. Emily stifled a scream. Something was trying to get in, something strong enough to bend reinforced metal. Frank picked up his shotgun, knowing it was futile but unable to do nothing. Stay behind me. The door tore open with a screech of metal, revealing a silhouette backlit by an unnatural purple glow. Frank raised the gun. Then the figure spoke, a human voice, desperate and authoritative. Mr. Daniels. Frank Daniels, I'm Captain William Taylor, United States Army Special Forces. We need you to come with us immediately. Why me? Frank demanded, not lowering the weapon. Because 20 years ago you participated in Operation Silent Vigil in Vietnam. You were exposed to something the government classified. Your blood work has a marker we need. You're immune to their technology. As the captain spoke, a thunderous boom shook the earth. On the horizon beyond the farm, a massive alien craft was descending directly toward them. They've traced our signal, Captain Taylor said urgently. They're coming for you specifically, sir, you and others like you. The final pieces clicked in Frank's mind. The strange quarantine after that jungle mission, the lifelong medical checks, the government benefits that came with uncomfortable non-disclosure agreements. Emily, Margaret, go with them, Frank said, his decision made. I'll hold them off. No, sir, Captain Taylor interrupted. With respect, you're the asset we need to save. We have transport waiting." As they emerged from the cellar, Frank saw the black helicopter concealed behind his barn, its design unlike any military craft he recognized. Beyond it, the massive alien ship was now clearly visible, heading directly for his property. "Why me?" Frank asked again as they ran. "Because," Taylor answered grimly, "you're one of the few humans they actually fear." Aboard the Vraxian command ship, alarms blared. "Supreme Commander," an officer called, "we're detecting resistance." Zorthel turned all 6 eyes toward the tactical display. "Impossible. Their weapons cannot harm us." "Not weapons," the officer clarified. "Some kind of quantum field is interfering with our harvesting technology, and we've detected anomalous biological signatures among the humans, ones with cellular structures resistant to our processing." For the first time in his long existence, Zorthal felt something akin to doubt. Locate the source of the interference. Prioritize capture of these anomalous specimens. "There's more," his second-in-command added. "The humans are adapting faster than projected. One of our scout ships reports a breach of their containment protocols." The Supreme Commander's exoskeleton stiffened. "Show me." The display shifted to internal footage from one of their collection vessels. An insignificant human wielding a primitive cutting tool had somehow disabled 2 Vraxian soldiers and was freeing captured specimens. Worse, other humans were following his lead, organizing resistance within the very heart of their ship. "Impossible," Zorthal hissed. "They are primitive, weak. We studied them for cycles." "Evidently," Vexmore observed, "we studied the wrong things." Captain Jack Morris drove the emergency axe into the joint of the alien's armor, finding the vulnerable gap by pure instinct. The creature emitted a high-pitched shriek as blue ichor sprayed from the wound. "They can die," Jack shouted to the growing band of survivors rallying behind him. "They're not invincible." What had begun as desperate self-defense had transformed into an organized rebellion within the alien vessel. Flight crews from a dozen aircraft, military personnel among the passengers, and ordinary people driven by extraordinary courage formed a ragtag resistance force. They discovered the aliens' weaknesses through trial and bloodshed: poor peripheral vision, vulnerability to certain sound frequencies, joints in their exoskeletons that couldn't be fully armored. "They're herding more people in through that corridor," reported a Marine who had been traveling on leave. "At least 1,000. Jack nodded grimly. "Then that's where we're going. Pass the word. Sharp objects to the joint between head and thorax. Makeshift sonic weapons at the frequency we discovered. And remember, they don't expect us to fight back. That's our only advantage." As they prepared to move out, Jack caught sight of his reflection in a piece of broken glass. Bloodied, determined, transformed from an ordinary pilot into something else, a leader, a fighter, a symbol of humanity's refusal to go quietly. Something was changing inside him, inside all of them. The fear was still there, but now channeled into cold, calculating rage. If these monsters thought humans would be easy prey, they were about to learn how wrong they were. And somewhere below, on the planet they called home, Jack knew others must be fighting too. Humanity had survived ice ages, plagues, and their own penchant for self-destruction. They weren't about to let some alien harvesters end their story. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They had judged humanity by its technology, not by its spirit. And now they would pay for that mistake in blood, whatever color it might be. As darkness fell across a world in chaos, the true scale of the invasion became clear. Billions captured or in hiding. Governments in disarray. Conventional military forces rendered nearly useless. Yet in underground bunkers, makeshift resistance cells, the crawl spaces of harvester ships, and secret laboratories hidden from public knowledge for decades, humanity was doing what it had always done best: adapting, surviving, preparing to strike back. The Vraxians had come expecting an easy harvest. What they found instead was a species that refused to accept extinction, a species that, when pushed to the edge of annihilation, revealed its true nature, not the civilized veneer they presented to each other, but the indomitable core of ancestors who had clawed their way to the top of a savage food chain and stayed there through sheer force of will. The aliens thought humans were weak. They were about to discover just how dead wrong they were. 3 weeks after the arrival, what remained of humanity lived in shadows. The Vraxian harvesters had taken 4 billion people. Entire cities stood empty. monuments to a civilization that had flourished, unaware of its fragility. The skies remained a sickly purple, the massive alien ships hovering like obsidian cancers against clouds that never parted. Captain Jack Morris led his ragtag band through the intestinal corridors of Harvester Ship Delta 17, as they'd come to call it. 63 survivors, former passengers and crew from a dozen different aircraft, now unrecognizable as the civilians they'd once been. "Movement ahead," whispered Mia, a former flight attendant who'd proven herself the group's best scout. 2 guards, standard pattern. Jack nodded, signaling with hand gestures perfected over weeks of brutal trial and error. 3 fighters moved silently forward, makeshift weapons at the ready, sharpened metal from aircraft frames wrapped with insulation for grips. The terrible efficiency with which ordinary people had adapted to killing still disturbed Jack. More disturbing was how naturally leadership had come to him, the weight of life and death decisions settling on his shoulders like it belonged there. "Remember," he whispered to the new recruits, "between the neck plates, angled upward, that's where their neural cluster is. 1 clean strike." The ambush was over in seconds. 2 aliens down, blue ichor pooling beneath their twitching forms. "Strip them," Jack ordered. "Anything useful, communication devices, weapons, tools." As they harvested the harvesters, Jack caught Sarah watching him, her expression unreadable. His co-pilot had become his right hand, but lately, something had changed between them, a distance born of necessity and horror. "We need to talk," she said later, as they made camp in an abandoned maintenance shaft. Their people collapsed in exhausted heaps, snatching precious minutes of sleep between patrols. "About?" Jack asked, cleaning alien blood from his blade, once an emergency axe, now worn to a wicked edge from repeated use. "About what we're becoming." Sarah's voice was low, her eyes darting to ensure no one overheard. "We're efficient now, Jack. Too efficient. The way Rodriguez enjoyed taking down that guard yesterday." Jack sighed, the weight of 3 weeks pressing down on him. "What choice do we have? It's survival." "I know, but if we get out of here, what will be left of us? Of our humanity?" Before Jack could answer, their makeshift radio crackled to life. A device cobbled together from airplane parts and alien technology by Trevor, a high school physics teacher who'd been flying home from a conference. "Repeat. This is Earth Resistance Coalition broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. If anyone can hear this, you are not alone. We are fighting back. The Denver hub has fallen. I repeat, Denver hub has fallen. First major victory against the invaders. More to follow. Coordinates for sanctuary follow." The transmission dissolved into static. Jack and Sarah stared at each other, the first genuine hope in weeks lighting their eyes. "We're not alone," Sarah whispered. "And beneath it," Jack added, "we're winning somewhere." Dr. Ethan Mitchell hadn't seen daylight in 21 days. Project Sentinel's underground facility had become humanity's best hope and his prison. Dozens of the world's brightest minds worked around the clock, fueled by desperation and the terrible knowledge of what happened to those taken by the harvesters. "The quantum field is stable," Ethan reported, the bags under his eyes testament to too many sleepless nights. "But the range is still limited to about 2 kilometers. Dr. Eleanor West nodded, making notes on her tablet. Like everyone in the facility, she'd aged years in weeks. 2 kilometers might be enough. The assault team leaves in 6 hours. They'll plant the disruptor directly beneath the Portland harvester." "And the test subjects?" Ethan asked, the words bitter in his mouth. Eleanor's expression hardened. "The recovered specimens are providing valuable data. They're people, Eleanor. People who were inside those ships and escaped. And now they're our only window into understanding what happens to those taken." She lowered her voice. "The cellular changes are significant. We don't know if they're still entirely human." Ethan thought of the holding cells on Sublevel 3, the former captives of the Vraxians, now captives of their own species. Their skin mottled with strange patterns, eyes dilated permanently, babbling about the voice and the unity. Some had developed extraordinary abilities, enhanced strength, unusual sensory perception. The ethical line had blurred weeks ago. What was acceptable in the name of species survival? "There's something else," Eleanor said, interrupting his moral crisis. "The president is asking about Omega Protocol." Ethan's blood ran cold. It's not ready. The targeting system would kill as many humans as Vraxians. He's running out of options, Ethan. The European resistance just fell. Australia gone dark 3 days ago. China's underground bunkers breached yesterday. How many are left? Ethan asked quietly. Eleanor looked away. Latest estimate, less than 500 million humans still free. Maybe half that actually organized into resistance. Jesus! No, Eleanor said flatly. He's not answering prayers these days. A klaxon suddenly blared through the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the lab in crimson. Security breach, level 1. All personnel to emergency stations. Eleanor's tablet lit up with security feeds. No, she whispered. They found us. On the screen, Vraxian soldiers poured through the facility's upper entrance. The supposedly secret, supposedly impenetrable entrance. How? Ethan demanded. Eleanor's face went ashen. The test subjects, they must be broadcasting somehow. Homing beacon. They watched in horror as security teams engaged the aliens, weaponry specifically designed to target Vraxian biology cutting through the first wave. But there were more, always more. We need to move the core research deeper, Eleanor decided, already gathering crucial drives. Sub-level 5 will seal off the upper facility. What about the people up there? Ethan protested. Eleanor met his gaze with cold calculation. They buy us time. Without the quantum disruptor technology, humanity has no chance. None. More alarms joined the cacophony as Ethan realized her intention. You're going to flood the upper levels with radiation. Kill everyone, human and Vraxian alike. I'm going to save our species, Dr. Mitchell. The question is whether you're with me. Frank Daniels watched the sunset from the roof of what had once been a shopping mall in rural Kentucky, now the makeshift headquarters of Resistance Cell East 7. The building's concrete construction and remote location had made it ideal for hiding nearly 300 survivors. Beautiful, isn't it? Said Captain William Taylor, joining him at the edge. Even with those abominations floating up there, the sun still sets. Frank nodded silently. 3 weeks of running, fighting, and watching people die had left little room for admiration of natural beauty. But Taylor was right. There was something defiant about that ordinary sun, continuing its cycle, regardless of the apocalypse happening below. The blood tests came back, Taylor said after a moment. 17 more positives. All veterans, of specific campaigns. Gulf War, certain missions in Afghanistan, Vietnam, like you. What the hell did they do to us? Frank muttered. Taylor lit a cigarette. Luxury items now, but the captain always seemed to have a supply. Operation Silent Vigil wasn't about the Viet Cong. Your unit found something in that jungle, something that wasn't human. I don't remember any of that. You wouldn't. They drugged you all afterward, covered it up. But whatever happened there changed your cellular structure. The same way certain Gulf operations did for others. The government has been tracking physiological anomalies among veterans for decades. Frank absorbed this. Another piece of his life revealed as a lie. And this makes us not immune, resistant. Your nervous system doesn't interface with their tech the way most humans do, makes you harder to control, harder to process. And your blood, something in your blood actually hurts them, kills them, when directly exposed. Before Frank could respond, the door to the roof burst open. Emily, his daughter, emerged with a radio clutched in her hands. In the weeks since the invasion, she'd transformed from a college student to a hardened resistance coordinator, handling communications between scattered survivor groups. Dad, Captain, we just received a transmission from the Western Coalition. They've taken down a harvester ship in Denver. Taylor straightened. How? Something about a quantum disruptor planted underneath it. The ship crashed, minimal human casualties. They're salvaging weapons, tech, everything they can. For the first time in weeks, Frank felt something like hope. Are there more of these disruptors? Emily's excitement dimmed slightly. That's the thing. It was the only prototype, from some government project called Sentinel. Taylor and Frank exchanged glances. That matches our intel about a research facility in California, the captain said. If they have technology that can bring down ships, we need to make contact, Frank concluded. Emily handed over the radio. There's more. They mentioned the returned, people who escaped the harvesters. They're changed somehow. Frank thought of Margaret, his wife, taken during their escape from Montana. The ache of her absence hadn't diminished with time. If she was alive, if she could be one of these returned. "I volunteer for the next rescue mission," he said firmly. "Frank," Taylor cautioned, "the mortality rate on those runs is over 70%. I don't give a damn. If there's even a chance Margaret's alive in one of those things, I'm going." The conversation halted as a low rumble shook the building. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The rumble grew louder. "What the hell is that?" Taylor muttered, moving to the roof's edge. In the distance, silhouetted against the setting sun, a massive Vraxian ship was descending, directly toward their location. "They found us," Frank realized. "Everyone to evacuation points. Now." As sirens blared throughout the mall, Frank saw smaller ships detaching from the harvester, drop ships carrying soldiers. They'd never get everyone out in time. Emily grabbed his arm. "Dad, the tunnels might not hold everyone." "Then we fight," he said grimly. "We've been preparing for this." Taylor was already barking orders into his radio, directing defense teams to predetermined positions. The resistance had known this day might come, had drilled for it endlessly. Now the drills became reality. Frank checked his rifle, loaded with special ammunition created from his own blood and that of other resistant veterans. He glanced back at his daughter, memorizing her face in case it was the last time. "I love you." She shouldered her own weapon. "Save it for when we win, old man." Supreme Commander Zorthal's patience had evaporated weeks ago. The harvest, supposed to be a simple resource-gathering operation, had become the most problematic campaign of his 6th-century career. "Explain," he demanded, his voice vibrating with barely controlled fury. "How a species with primitive nuclear fission technology managed to down one of our harvester ships?" The science officer's exoskeleton clicked nervously. "Analysis suggests a targeted quantum field that disrupted our gravitational stabilizers. Technology we didn't believe they possessed. You assured me their quantum understanding was theoretical at best." "It was. Our intelligence showed no practical applications beyond basic communication experiments. This represents an exponential advancement." Zorthal silenced the officer with a savage gesture, and the resistance cells. The escaped specimen. His military commander stepped forward, mandibles tight against his face in the Vraxian expression of shame. "The human nervous system adapts faster than any species we've harvested. Those who survive initial processing develop resistances. Some even appear to reverse engineer aspects of our technology through mere exposure." "Impossible." "The evidence is overwhelming, Supreme Commander. Their neural plasticity exceeds anything in our records, and worse, they're coordinating globally, despite our communication blackouts." Zorthal paced the command deck, all 6 limbs tense. This was supposed to be a simple operation: harvest the most viable specimens, process the rest for base biological material, strip the planet of useful resources, and depart. The humans should have been cowering, disorganized, easy prey. Instead, they fought back. Not just with desperation, but with shocking innovation. Adapting Vraxian technology against them, developing countermeasures that should have been centuries beyond their capability. "The High Council demands answers," Zorthal said finally. "Our losses are unprecedented." The unspoken reality hung in the air. No harvester fleet had ever faced meaningful resistance from a pre-spacefaring civilization. The Dominion's conquest had always been assured by their technological superiority. This failure would not be tolerated. "Implement full processing protocols," Zorthal ordered. "No more selective harvesting. Every human, every resource. Strip this world to bedrock." His second-in-command shifted uncomfortably. "The special specimens? The resistant ones? Find them, extract them. I want to know what makes these creatures so," he searched for the right word, "persistent." The assault on the resistant stronghold in Kentucky was brutal and swift. Frank Daniels fought like a man possessed, his special ammunition proving devastatingly effective against the Vraxian ground forces, blue ichor spraying as biological rounds made contact with alien physiology. But for every invader that fell, 3 more took its place. The resistance fighters were being pushed back, corridor by corridor, toward the evacuation tunnels. "We're not going to make it," gasped Rodriguez, a former Marine bleeding from a gash across his torso. "There's too many." Frank reloaded, hands steady despite the chaos. "We're buying time, that's all, making sure the evac teams get clear." They'd established fallback positions throughout the mall, each designed to inflict maximum casualties on the advancing aliens. But the Vaxians were learning, adapting their tactics, avoiding direct confrontation where possible, using their superior technology to bypass strong points. "East section breached," came a desperate cry over the radio. "They're inside the tunnels." Frank's heart seized. Emily was coordinating the evacuation from the eastern exit. "Keep holding here," he ordered Rodriguez. "I'm heading east. You'll never make it alone." But Frank was already running, decades of combat experience guiding him through maintenance corridors and air ducts, avoiding the main confrontation points. His mind filled with images of Emily as a child, laughing on a tire swing, as a teenager, defiant and brilliant, now a leader people looked to for hope. He emerged into the east corridor to find chaos, aliens flooding in from multiple breach points, resistance fighters desperately trying to hold them back. Beyond them, civilians were still streaming into the escape tunnels. "Emily," he shouted over the gunfire and screams. "Emily." A flash of familiar blonde hair caught his eye. His daughter directing a group of children towards safety, firing her weapon one-handed to cover their retreat. As he watched, a Vraxian soldier emerged from a side passage behind her. "Behind you!" Frank roared, already sprinting forward, knowing he was too far away. Emily turned, but too slowly. The alien's capture device activated, enveloping her in shimmering energy. Her body went rigid, suspended in mid-air. Something snapped in Frank Daniels. The world narrowed to a single focal point, his daughter, his only family, being taken. The rage that flooded him was primal, transcending conscious thought. He didn't remember crossing the distance. Didn't remember emptying his rifle into the alien's thorax. Didn't remember tearing the creature's exoskeleton apart with his bare hands, his blood mingling with alien ichor. Emily collapsed as the capture field dissipated. Frank gathered her into his arms, checking for injuries. "Dad," she whispered, eyes wide with shock. "Your hands—" Frank looked down to see his skin glowing with faint blue luminescence where it had contacted the alien's blood. The same blue as Vraxian technology. Before he could process this, Captain Taylor's voice crackled over the radio. "All units, fall back. I repeat, fall back. They've breached the command center." Frank helped Emily to her feet. "Can you run?" She nodded shakily. "Then move." "I'll cover you." They joined the retreating flood of survivors, Frank guarding their rear. But with each step, the strange glow spread further up his arms, and with it came something else. Awareness, as if he could suddenly sense the Vraxians' presence, their movements, their intention. By the time they reached the rendezvous point, a system of caves 5 miles from the mall, Frank's entire body hummed with unfamiliar energy. The surviving resistance members stared at him with a mixture of awe and fear. "What's happening to you?" Taylor asked, keeping his distance. "I don't know," Frank admitted, "but I can feel them. The aliens. I know where they are, what they're planning." Emily touched his glowing arm cautiously. "Does it hurt?" "No, it feels powerful." Taylor consulted with the Resistance's medical officer, who kept his distance while examining Frank with a radiation detector. "Whatever's happening," the captain finally said, "it's accelerating. The Vraxian biological material is integrating with your already altered physiology." "Is he dangerous?" someone asked. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. In 3 weeks, they'd learned to fear anything alien, anything unknown. "I'm still me," Frank insisted, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. The energy coursing through him whispered of possibilities, strength, awareness, power. "We need to get him to the Sentinel facility," Taylor decided. "If anyone can understand this, it's them." "No time," Frank said with sudden certainty. "The aliens know about Sentinel. They're converging there now, every ship, every soldier. Whatever's happening there, it terrifies them." "How could you possibly know that?" Taylor demanded. Frank's glowing eyes met the captain's. "Because now I can hear them too." In the remains of Project Sentinel, Dr. Ethan Mitchell worked feverishly to complete the Omega Protocol. The facility had been breached 4 hours ago. Only the deepest levels remained secure, and not for much longer. 37 survivors remained from an original complement of over 300 scientists and security personnel. The rest had bought time with their lives, some dying in direct combat, Others sealed behind radiation barriers that Eleanor had activated without hesitation. "The targeting system is aligned," Ethan reported, fingers flying across holographic controls. "But without the satellite network." "Use their ships," Eleanor suggested, her lab coat stained with blood, some red, some blue. "Their communication network is still active. We can piggyback the signal." Ethan nodded, admiring her brilliance even as he questioned her humanity. The woman had sacrificed hundreds without blinking, all in service to a desperate plan that might not even work. "If this goes wrong," he began. "Then we're no worse off," she cut him off. "This is our last stand, Ethan. The resistance is falling worldwide. The Vraxians are implementing full processing protocols." "How do you know that?" Eleanor hesitated. "The test subjects, the ones most changed. They can sense the Vraxian communication." A heavy impact shook the laboratory, dust falling from the ceiling. The aliens were using some kind of energy weapon to break through the final barriers. "Time's up," Eleanor said. "Activate Omega." Ethan's finger hovered over the final command sequence. "There are still billions of people in those ships. Processed, changed. But people. This will kill them all." "They're already dead," Eleanor said coldly. "What the Vraxians do, it destroys everything that makes them human. Neural reconfiguration, biological restructuring. They're just resources now." Another impact. "Closer?" "You don't know that for certain," Ethan argued. "The returned, some of them maintained memory, identity. The failures, the ones whose processing was incomplete." Eleanor grabbed his wrist. "Every second you hesitate, more humans are processed. Billions against millions. Ethan, do the math." The final barrier fell. Vraxian soldiers poured into the laboratory, capture devices activating. Eleanor's hand slammed down on Ethan's, completing the sequence. For humanity. A pulse of energy exploded outward from the Omega core, invisible but powerful enough to make the air shimmer. It expanded exponentially, passing through the facility, through the earth above them, reaching toward the harvester ships. The Vraxian soldiers dropped instantly, exoskeletons crumpling as if suddenly empty. But, to Ethan's horror, the pulse didn't stop there. Human resistance members began collapsing too, blood vessels rupturing, neurons firing in catastrophic cascades. "No!" he cried, trying to abort the sequence. "It's killing everyone." Eleanor watched impassively as humans and aliens alike fell around them. A necessary sacrifice. Ethan stared at her in dawning horror. "What have you done? What is this really?" "Salvation," she said simply. "The only way humans survive this is to become something else. Something stronger." The pulse reached the harvester ships. Aboard every vessel, every Vraxian dropped dead instantly. But so did most humans, processed or not. The ships themselves, operating on Vraxian biological technology, began falling from the sky. Ethan fell to his knees, blood trickling from his nose and ears. The pulse affected him too, but lower. The frequent exposure to the quantum field had given him partial resistance. "Why am I still alive?" he demanded, voice weak. Eleanor remained standing, untouched by the energy that killed everyone else. "Because we're the next step, Ethan. The worthy ones evolve." As consciousness faded, Ethan finally understood. Eleanor hadn't been trying to save humanity. She'd been selecting for its replacement. The pulse was calibrated to spare only those with specific genetic markers. Specific neural patterns, not humanity's savior, its extinction event. The world went dark as the skies filled with falling ships, billions of lives extinguished in a single moment of calculated genocide. Humanity had lost, not to the aliens, but to itself. Darkness, not the absence of light, but the absence of everything. Then, slowly, awareness returned to Dr. Ethan Mitchell. First sensation, pain, radiating from every nerve ending. Second, the taste of blood in his mouth. Third, the sound of breathing not his own. He forced his eyes open to find Eleanor West staring down at him, her face illuminated by the emergency lighting of Project Sentinel's deepest level. Around them lay the bodies of humans and Vraxians alike, frozen in death poses as the Omega pulse had caught them. Ethan tried to sit up, failed. What have you done?" "Welcome back," Eleanor said, her voice different somehow, resonant with harmonics that hadn't been there before. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't make it. Saved humanity. Or, rather, saved what humanity needs to become. She gestured around the lab. The pulse worked perfectly. Every Vraxian on Earth and in orbit, dead, along with approximately 98.7% of humans. "You're insane," Ethan whispered. The magnitude of the genocide struck Ethan like a physical blow. "Billions! You killed billions." "I selected for survival," Eleanor corrected. "Only those with the right genetic markers survived. Those with neural structures capable of interfacing with Vraxian technology. The next step in human evolution." "I'm pragmatic." "The Vraxians weren't the threat, Ethan. They were the opportunity. For 30 years we've been preparing for this moment, integrating their technology, understanding their biology, Operation Silent Vigil, Gulf War Syndrome, dozens of classified incidents, all carefully orchestrated exposures to prepare select human populations. Early experiments. Crude but effective. We needed to know which human genetic profiles could successfully integrate with Vraxian biology." She helped him to his feet. "But your generation too. The scientists exposed to quantum field research were selected specifically for genetic compatibility." Ethan's scientific mind pieced it together, even through the horror. "The veterans, their resistance to Vraxian technology. My entire career was engineered." Ethan became aware of new sensations flooding his mind, awareness beyond normal perception. He could feel the electrical systems in the walls, the quantum fluctuations in the air. More disturbingly, he could sense Eleanor's thoughts brushing against his own. Your recruitment, your research focus, even your ethical objections, all predicted, all useful in refining the Omega Protocol. Eleanor's eyes gleamed with fanatical certainty. "The pulse didn't just kill, Ethan. It transformed those with the potential. Like us." "What are we becoming?" he asked, horrified yet fascinated. "The next dominant species on Earth," she replied, "and soon beyond." Captain Jack Morris awakened to the sensation of falling. The harvester ship was plummeting from the sky, internal systems failing catastrophically. Around him, his fellow survivors lay motionless, eyes vacant, all dead. All except Sarah, who stared at him with the same confusion he felt. Before he could answer, knowledge flooded his consciousness. Not memories, but data streaming directly into his awareness. The harvester ships were failing globally. The Vraxians were extinct. Less than 20 million humans remained alive worldwide. "Jack," she whispered. "What happened?" Sarah touched her temple, wincing. "I can feel it too. Like information just appearing in my head." "How do I know this?" he gasped. The ship shuddered violently as it hit the upper atmosphere, friction heating the outer hull to incandescence. They had minutes before impact. "There," Sarah pointed to a Vraxian transport pod. "But we don't know how to operate it." Jack approached the control panel, expecting alien incomprehensibility. Instead, the interface responded to his proximity. Controls reconfiguring to match human physiology. More disturbingly, he understood how to operate it, without being taught. "We need to get to an escape pod," Jack decided, helping Sarah to her feet. They navigated through corridors lined with the dead humans and aliens alike, struck down in an instant by whatever catastrophe had occurred. I just know," he said, fingers dancing across the panel. The pod detached from the dying harvester with a metallic shriek, accelerating away moments before the massive ship began breaking apart. Through the viewport, they watched in stunned silence as dozens of harvester ships plummeted across the horizon, burning through the atmosphere like artificial meteors. The purple haze that had dominated the sky for weeks was dissipating, revealing clear blue for the first time since the invasion. "We won?" Sarah's voice was uncertain. Jack shook his head, new information continuing to filter into his awareness. "No, something else happened. Something orchestrated." The pod's communication system activated automatically, connecting to surviving human enclaves. A woman's voice emerged, calm, authoritative, speaking as if reading from a prepared statement. "This is Dr. Eleanor West of Project Sentinel. To all survivors of the Pulse, you have been chosen. Your genetic structure contains specific markers that allowed you to survive what was necessary to eliminate the Vraxian threat. You are now receiving information directly through quantum entanglement pathways in your evolved neural structure. Do not be alarmed. This is humanity's rebirth." The pod's navigation system activated, plotting a course toward the nearest gathering point for survivors. Jack couldn't have stopped it if he tried, and strangely, he didn't want to. "I think," he said slowly, "we're being called home." Sarah gripped Jack's arm tightly. "Jack, what is she talking about? What's happening to us?" Frank Daniels opened his eyes to find himself floating in darkness, not physical darkness, but a void of consciousness. His body felt distant, irrelevant, while his mind expanded beyond normal boundaries. "No," came a response that wasn't his own thought. "You are transitioning." "Am I dead?" he wondered. The voice belonged to no one and everyone, a collective consciousness formed of countless minds suddenly connected across vast distances. "My daughter?" he projected into the void. Fragments of memory returned, the resistant stronghold overrun, Emily collapsing beside him, his own body glowing with blue energy as the pulse swept through. Then, nothing. Before Frank could respond, the void shifted, taking form, not physical space, but a conceptual framework where thoughts could be visualized. He perceived himself not as a body but as a nexus of energy, connected to thousands of other points of light, other survivors. "Here, Dad." Emily's mental voice found him in the darkness. "I'm scared. What's happening to us?" And at the center of this network, a presence more defined than the others. Eleanor West.
"I saved what matters," Eleanor corrected.
The Vraxians were merely catalysts for our transformation. Their invasion was anticipated, engineered even, to provide the biological material we needed for the next evolutionary leap. Frank's anger manifested as red pulses through his energy signature. "You did this. You killed billions. Welcome to the first assembly of Homo Novus." Her thoughts echoed through the shared consciousness. "You represent the continuation of the human species, evolved, connected, superior." "You worked with them?" came Captain Taylor's distinctive thought pattern. Shock rippled through the collective consciousness as survivors processed this revelation. Not initially. Eleanor's presence expanded, sharing memories that weren't hers, decades of secret projects, recovered alien technology, preparations for this precise moment. "The first Vraxian scout ships arrived 50 years ago. We captured one, studied their biology, their technology. We learned they harvest compatible species throughout the galaxy. So you offered them humanity on a platter?" Frank's disgust colored the void. "I offered them a trap," Eleanor corrected. "They believed they were harvesting us. In reality, we were using them to facilitate our transformation. Their neural technology, their biological adaptability, all superior to ours, all necessary for our evolution." Images flooded the collective secret facilities where captured Vraxian technology was reverse-engineered, military operations designed specifically to expose soldiers to alien biological material, decades of manipulation culminating in the pulse that killed most of humanity while transforming the survivors. "This is genocide." Ethan Mitchell's consciousness joined the assembly, his scientific understanding making the horror all the clearer. "You've destroyed our species." "I've saved it," Eleanor insisted. The Vraxians were merely one threat among many. The pulse was necessary not just to eliminate them, but to force our evolution before the others arrive. "Others?" The question echoed from thousands of minds simultaneously. "What have we become?" Jack Morris asked, his pilot's consciousness distinct, even in this void. Eleanor's consciousness expanded further, revealing the final truth. The galaxy teems with predatory species. The Vraxians were scavengers compared to what's coming. Humanity would never have survived as we were, fragmented, limited by physical bodies and physical distance, incapable of true unity. Frank felt his consciousness connecting more deeply with Emily's, with Taylor's, with strangers across the planet, survivors all experiencing the same revelation. Their thoughts, fears, and hopes mingled in this new shared reality. "Something new," Eleanor answered. "Neither human nor Vraxian, but a synthesis. Our bodies remain, but our consciousness is now entangled across quantum fields. We can share knowledge instantly, coordinate perfectly, evolve deliberately." "Survival has always demanded sacrifice," Eleanor responded implacably. "Now we face a choice: remain trapped in outrage over what's done, or embrace what we've become and prepare for what's coming." "At what cost?" Ethan challenged. The collective consciousness pulsed with conflict, grief, rage, fear, but also curiosity, wonder, and the undeniable exhilaration of expanded awareness. Frank focused on Emily's presence, clinging to that connection amid the chaos. "I'm still me," he projected to her. "Whatever else has changed, I'm still your father." "I know," she responded. "And I'm still me, just more." Frank nodded, sitting up. His awareness remained split, part in his physical body, part in the quantum network connecting all survivors. It's permanent. We're changed. In the physical world, Frank's body lay in a medical pod within a hardened facility beneath what had once been Project Sentinel. His eyes opened, glowing with the same blue luminescence that had begun in Kentucky. Beside him, Emily regained consciousness, her eyes reflecting the same light. "The connection," she murmured. "I can still feel it, even awake." "The transformation is proceeding faster than projected," she announced. "Neural integration at 87% and climbing. Within days, we'll achieve complete synchronization." "And then what?" Frank demanded, his voice carrying the weight of billions of lost lives. "What gives you the right to decide humanity's future?" Dr. Eleanor West stood at the center of the facility, surrounded by screens displaying survivor locations across the planet. Her expression was triumphant as she addressed the room of awakening Homo Novus. Eleanor turned to him, unperturbed. "Not me, Frank. Us, sir. All of us. For the first time in human history, we can truly decide collectively. No governments, no borders, no conflicting interests. One species with one purpose, survival." "Survival against what?" Captain Taylor asked, his military mind already calculating threats and responses. Eleanor gestured to a screen showing deep space telemetry. The Vraxian Dominion was merely one of 17 known harvester civilizations, and beyond them, greater threats. The quantum network allows us to perceive what human senses never could. "The harvesters are the least of our concerns," Eleanor continued. "They flee from these, the cosmic devourers, and now that we've eliminated the Vraxians from this sector, we've drawn attention." The facility fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had not won its freedom. It had merely graduated to a larger, more dangerous game. The screen shifted, showing something massive moving at the edge of the solar system, not a ship, but an entity so vast it defied comprehension. "How long do we have?" Jack Morris asked, entering the facility with Sarah at his side, their arrival somehow expected by all. Ethan Mitchell studied the quantum data flowing through his enhanced consciousness. "The pulse weapon, Omega, it wasn't just designed for Vraxians, was it?" 3 months, perhaps 4, Eleanor answered. "Barely enough time to complete the integration, repurpose Vraxian technology, and prepare our defenses." "No," Eleanor admitted. "It's adaptable. With sufficient understanding of a species' neural structure, it can be calibrated accordingly." "You knew," Frank realized, anger bubbling beneath his calm exterior. "You knew about these devourers all along. The Vraxians weren't the threat. They were running from the real threat, and you used their arrival to prepare us." Eleanor's expression hardened. "What would you have had me do? Tell the world cosmic horrors were coming? Watch humanity waste decades in denial, political squabbling and half measures? The transformation required Vraxian biological material, their technology. We needed them to come. Billions who would have died regardless," Eleanor countered. "At least, this way, humanity survives in some form." "And the cost?" Emily asked, her young voice carrying the weight of maturity beyond her years. "Billions dead." The debate might have continued, but at that moment, every survivor, whether physically present or connected through the quantum network, received the same alarming information, massive energy signatures activating throughout the solar system. The Vraxian fleet had included automated deadman switches that human sensors couldn't detect. "Can we stop them?" Jack asked. Holographic displays showed hundreds of Vraxian to Vraxian devices awakening across Earth and throughout the solar system, doomsday weapons designed to sterilize planets, render them uninhabitable to any life. "They're triggered by the complete extinction of Vraxian command consciousness," Ethan realized, processing the data streaming through the quantum network. A final act of spite. Frank stepped forward, his consciousness expanding through the quantum network, connecting with every survivor simultaneously. "Then we accelerate the integration." Eleanor's confidence faltered for the first time. "Not with our current capabilities. We're still integrating, still learning to use our enhanced abilities." "That's not possible," Eleanor objected. The human brain can't— We're not just human anymore, Frank interrupted. You made sure of that. Together, his thoughts echoed through the collective. Not as her tools, but as equals. Not for her vision, but for our own. His consciousness reached deeper into the quantum field, drawing on his unique biology, the result of decades-old exposure to Vraxian material, enhanced by the pulse, refined by his recent direct contact with their blood. His mind touched Emily's, then Taylor's, then expanded exponentially to encompass every survivor across the planet. The quantum network flared with energy as millions of minds synchronized, not in the controlled manner Eleanor had planned, but in a spontaneous fusion of consciousness driven by immediate necessity. Human individuality merged with Vraxian collective efficiency, creating something entirely new. In orbit, Vraxian doomsday devices began final countdown sequences. On Earth, the transformed survivors acted as one organism, directing their shared consciousness through the quantum field. The Vraxian technology responded to their commands, not through physical interfaces, but through direct neural connection. One by one, the devices deactivated, their biological components recognizing the hybrid consciousness as authorized commanders. What Eleanor had intended to take weeks occurred in minutes, complete integration with Vraxian systems, complete command of their technology. In the facility, Frank opened eyes that now glowed with intense blue light. "It's done. You underestimated us," Jack said, his voice overlapping with Frank's, with Emily's, with every survivor's. "Not as individuals, as a species." Eleanor stared in disbelief. "How?" "The integration process should have taken— The collective consciousness was never meant to be controlled by one vision," Ethan added. "Its strength comes from diversity, from billions of years of evolution that produced unique minds capable of working together." Eleanor's carefully constructed plan, decades in the making, had been superseded in moments by the very transformation she had engineered. The survivors had become something she couldn't control, couldn't predict. "What now?" she asked, her voice small for the first time. Frank turned his gaze to the deep space telemetry, to the approaching cosmic devourers. "Now we prepare, not as your new species, but as our own creation." The 20 million survivors had established a new civilization unlike anything in human history, physically dispersed but mentally united through the quantum network. Individual identity remained, but existed alongside collective consciousness, allowing perfect cooperation without loss of diversity. 3 months later, Captain Jack Morris stood on the bridge of a vessel that had once been a Vraxian harvester ship, now transformed by hybrid technology into humanity's first true starship. Below, Earth was healing, the catastrophic loss of population balanced somewhat by the cessation of pollution, of resource depletion, of human conflict. "They're approaching the outer system," Sarah reported from the tactical station, her enhanced mind processing information at speeds no unmodified human could match. Jack nodded, feeling the collective awareness of every crew member, every human on Earth, supporting his command. All ships' final positions. Across the solar system, 50 converted harvester ships moved into formation. Earth's first defense fleet, crewed by humans who were no longer entirely human, armed with weapons based on Vraxian technology, but improved by human innovation. Dr. Ethan Mitchell's voice came through the quantum link. "The pulse weapon is calibrated to their neural patterns, firing solutions uploaded to all ships. They're scanning us," Frank reported from his station, "trying to determine our nature." On the main view screen, the first of the cosmic devourers became visible. Vast intelligences housed in bodies that existed partially in normal space, partially in dimensions humans once couldn't perceive. They moved with purpose toward Earth, drawn by the quantum disturbance of the Vraxian extinction event. "Let's show them," Jack ordered. The hybrid fleet accelerated toward the incoming threat, humanity's first act as a galactic civilization about to unfold. As the ships moved beyond Earth's orbit, a final transmission went out to the waiting millions below, not by radio or conventional means, but through the quantum network connecting all survivors. "We go to meet our future." Jack's thoughts merged with Frank's, with Ethan's, with every defender, not as the species we were born, but as the one we chose to become. Not as conquerors or victims, but as equals among the stars. And in that moment of confusion, humanity struck first. The cosmic devourers paused their approach, seemingly confused by the hybrid consciousness they encountered, neither purely human nor Vraxian, but something new, something unexpected. Supreme Admiral Nexvoth reviewed the final transmissions from Earth with mounting dread. The humans survived the Deadman protocols. In a distant sector of the galaxy, a Vraxian colony ship received the quantum pulse, signaling the extinction of their home fleet. Emergency protocols activated, awakening the preserved command staff from stasis. His science officer analyzed the data stream. Not just survived, they've changed, integrated our technology, our biology. They've become something new. Impossible! No species has ever successfully hybridized with Vraxian physiology. This one has, and they've repurposed our ships, our weapons. The science officer's mandibles clicked nervously. The final telemetry shows them engaging the Devourers. Nexvoth fell silent, processing the implications. The Vraxian Dominion had fled the cosmic Devourers for millennia, harvesting worlds to fuel their endless escape across the galaxy. Now this primitive species, deemed worthy only of processing, had stood to fight what the mighty Dominion could not face. "Set course for the Gamma Quadrant," he ordered finally. "Maximum distance from Earth sector." "Sir, shouldn't we alert the other colony ships?" The Supreme Admiral's 6 eyes focused on the final image transmitted from the Earth fleet. Hybrid vessels advancing against cosmic horrors, crewed by beings that should not exist. For the first time in recorded history, the mighty Vraxian Dominion fled, not from the Devourers but from their own creation. A new species born from the ashes of attempted conquest, more dangerous than anything they had encountered in 10,000 years of harvesting. "No," he decided, "let them find their own way, and pray to all ancestors that the humans never find us." The humans had been judged weak. The Vraxians had been dead wrong.